and also aims and objectives of story writing. And also here we are going to study about its form, its meaning, its reliability, and its how a story has to be concluded. And also here we are going to study in this course about the basic elements of popular form of creative writing, and also the plot structure, its atmosphere, and the characters, and how a story has to be narrated. The first thing is that every art has a form. And also, there is a famous statement which has been delivered by a critic called Herbert Reed that all art has its own form in conveying the method. And also, here we can see that the main important structure in writing a story is plot. Plot is the heart and soul of a story. When we start writing a story, the plot, we have to design a plot, and the character should be arranged in an interacting or according to the situation for greater effectiveness. And also, our skill lies in making it appear. It's on conscious arrangements, we can see. And also, our story not be either dull, nor diffusive, nor meaningless. And also, it should help to achieve our purpose why we are writing. And so, the plot plays a very important aspects in writing a story. And also, the formal structure of writing a story is an arrangement of characters which are interacting with the incidents, situations, and for greater effectiveness. When you choose a story, there should be a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it should move in such a way that it reflects the reality, and also it should not be like a fantasy where there is no reality. And we need to have a well thought out design so that the story which we are writing is neither dull nor diffusive, nor there is no meaningless to achieve the purpose. See, whatever the purpose we have chosen in writing a story, it has to be accomplished by incorporating certain aspects in the story. Either it might be an incident which you have come across while you're passing in the road, or the experience which you have got in your family or with your friends. And you start writing a story, it has to be there should be a reality in that. So when we write, we have to keep all these things in the mind, because plot is very important in writing a story. And also, we have to keep in our mind that the story, when we start writing a story, or when we start uh, thinking about writing a story, so we have to keep it in our mind that how to make it interesting. So when you start writing, you have to think how it should be interesting to other person, and how to say uh, it is true. So the story which you have plotted, how you are going to narrate it, and how best you can give the meaning to it. So whatever you have designed or planned, so it should reach the reader to whom you are writing. When you write a story, you have to keep in your mind the reader to whom you're writing. And also, the short stories are very interesting because it consumes 2 to 3 incidents in it, but not more than that. So when it comes to a novel, it is a long journey where you will come across many incidents which take place in and around the protagonist, that is the hero of that particular novel. But when it comes to a short story, it is a smaller one, and the device plot which would interest everybody. And there are some readers who hate to think, while there are others who want their stories to be no more than escape sessions in between the serious business of their daily life. See, the group of people or the target people for whom we are writing, it is an admixture of multi uh, dimensional people who think in a different perspective. All are not in the same mentality to accept it. And also, we can see that there are some minority people who are extreme in their instance of their uh, philosophy or morality or knowledge that they wanted to see in a particular story, or it might be based on certain incidents, and some might be philosophical or saintly. All you can say here is to just make your stories acquire the status of serious literature, and also it have hope that they will sell, and it should be related to some factors that give form to your story and make it interesting to the reader, and it should be meaningful. So, how to make the short story interesting? So, when you write a story, you should keep in your mind the need for design by your writing. What is the purpose of writing this story? And what you want to convey through that particular story. So, you have to think that a story must have a beginning and an end. So it should promise at the end, or a satisfaction should be reached when we conclude the story. So we might have heard when we were small, we might have heard the stories which has been narrated by our grandparents or our parents, or in the school our teachers might have delivered us the stories. So, in that way, we come in acquaintance with the stories, how the storyline moves. And also, the best kind of structuring the story would make the reader look forward to what's going to happen in the next uh, incidents, or what labor they have implied, or what glimpse we are going to get, or it might be of a god or a demon
Madam,
or a.
slides are not moving.
So just I'm one after the other slide I'm moving
No, not moving, madam.
now,
No.
because here I'm
Press F5, then move, madam.
ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಒಂದೊಂದೇ ಪ್ಲೇ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ.
ಬರ್ತಾ
ಎಫ್
ಇಲ್ಲ.
ಐ.
ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟಕ್ ಇದೆ.
ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ ಓಕೆ, ನಾನು F5 ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ.
ಎಸ್.
ಹೋಗ್ತಿದ್ಯಾ?
ನೋ. ಮೂವ್ ಆಗ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಎಸ್, ಮೂವಿಂಗ್.
F5 ಮಾಡಿದೆ. Wait, I'll try once again. I'll move.
Yes, yes.
Is it moving now?
No, no. Mohammed, can you see slides moving?
No, no, ma, it's not moving. It's not moving.
Yes, now moving, madam.
Now is it moving?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it moving now?
Yes.
Yes, madam.
Yes. Now move.
Is it clear to you?
Yes, ma.
Yes.
Yeah, you are getting me?
Yes, ma.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So when we draft a story, what all the things we need to give importance, and also what is the purpose of writing, whether we have reached the, or for why we are writing at, who is the target people, and also how to design the structure of a story in detail before writing out a story. So we have to keep certain things before writing a story. Certain things has to be given importance. So you should also give importance to uh, the small twists that you're going to bring in the story or in the plot, and also lead the settle your things, so what you're trying to say. And also it is very important to design the state that makes sure that there is a constant sense of movement in the plot. So when you write a plot, there should be a constant moving in the plot. There should not be a pause that it shift from one incident to another incident. It should go in such a natural way that none of them will feel that there is a pause in the middle in the plot. So you have to make the reader to involve, and it appear that you are talking to and not to him. So they should feel that as if the story is moving in such a line where it is not to him and not to him, not at him, but you are talking to the character. The character is moving the story, and you have to build up a certain in suspenses in the mind of the reader, that when he starts reading, he should think that what's going to happen next, what's going to happen, what the character is going to do, how it's going to progress. And these are all the things we have to keep in mind when it starts, when the storyline is written. And also we have to give how it's the show, it's intensive. So we have to give importance to the form. What is the form here? And also, sorry, it's gone back. Yeah. So how to make the short story appear true? So there are certain things we have to keep in mind when we are narrating, that it should reach the audiences. And also we have to give, but how we are going to ensure that the reader also goes along with you and does not give us up in the middle. So when we are narrating a story, we have to keep the whole mankind in the mind. So when we are narrating, we also should keep in mind the reader in a thoughts. So how he is going to think and how he is going to react to this. And also we have to keep the pace, and it all certain consideration like pace, tone, color, or which are the particular relevances to a short story has to be given, and the distance from a novel. See, when we write a novel, it is we keep certain things which are not incorporated in this short story. So short story is nothing but a few incidents which occurs in the life of the protagonist. And also we have to give consideration to these things, that make we have to make sure that there is constant sense of movement in the plot. And also we should see that there is a regular involvement or regard to make it appear that you're talking to and not to him. And also in talking to somebody, you must invite and not demand his attention. So we shouldn't demand the attention of the reader, but it should go in such a flow that there are long there should not be a long pause in that. And also, but the thinking of the character should not be allowed to indulge in too much. Self analysis for the needs to move or fast towards some revelations that the reader is waiting for. And also we have to keep in your mind and prevent you, however, for giving a piece of your mind to the unlovability of the society or an arbitrary god, but only through your characters, of course. And it will help you if you ensure all that very shasta, that the sympathizers of the reader are already with you. And also we have to when we narrate, we have certain guidelines is unraveling in the plot, we have to keep them. So when we write, we have to adopt a direct and conversationalizational tone and avoid verbosity. Try to charm the reader with an elegant turn or phrase rather than an impressive parody of words. And also, we have to try not to be obscure, as it may give the impression that you don't care for the reader, and enliven your narrative with flashes of humor, and also a bit of joke has to be incorporated in between, and it should not be a lengthy one. And with this reader ever at the expense of the characters, and you should see to that you and your readers and a shade wiser than these poor characters. And also, the general idea is that the reader should be with you in the plot as a sort of co conspirator. See, when we write a story, we have to keep all these things in our mind. We should involve the reader along with the writer, and certain things has to be avoided, and the characters what we portray should move along with the plot. And also, we the reader uh, should be wiser, or either the character be poor character, or then the general idea is that the reader should be with you in the plot. So when you start writing, you have to keep the reader in your mind. And also, when we write, we have to keep that how the short story appear to be true. So it should be interesting plot, and also maybe we use fantasy very less, illusionary things should be very less. And if it is too fantasy, people feel that it is not realistic, and also it will not interest all the mass. A few people may accept the fantasy, but most of the people rely on human condition, which is realistic. And also, when we write, the human condition could be either universal or social, related to a given time and place. See, when we write, we have to keep in our mind the generation for whom we are writing. The age is very important, and also we have to keep the whole universe in our mind, because we are not writing for a particular grade or class or group of people, but we are writing it for the universal, or the society in which we are living. And because even now we have read lot of things, lot of stories has been read by us. Just think about Shakespeare or other great writers who lived and perished in the past era. All of them have written with universal perception. See, whatever the characters we create, there should be in between us. The reader should be able to accept the characters as real men interacting with real events. So it should be, because literature is nothing but a mirror of the society. So what all the incidents takes place in and around us are depicted in our stories. It's with imaginary, adding up certain imaginary things into that, we feel that as if it is natural and realistic, it is near to our life. So in that way, we have to keep that the story should appear very true to the people. In that way, we can make that it is realistic. And also, when we write, we have to the reality as perceived by an artist can and does break through many barriers of customs, beliefs, and habits of thought which has been imposed on him. So a narrating or a storyteller should always be truthful, and he should see that it might be it should not go beyond his limit. It should be within the limit, or the within the framework which he has planned to write. And we have to be familiar at new. So it should be familiar, but it should be new thing should be incorporated in that. See, that story must have lived through a storm sometimes or other in your life, but if your story is based on it, you could embellish it with a fury of such dimensions that it will savor of a new and exciting experience. For example, you might have come across an incident somewhere else, and you have seen that you're the spectator of that particular incident. But when you start writing a story, you should give a new dimensional or new touch to that, and make it, if it is in an urban area, it can be taken to a rural area and it can be portrayed. And also we have to make certain things which is familiar to the human beings. So we should not write like aliens and all those things, because we human beings are not familiar with all those things. But the things which are in and around us make the people to believe that it is there is something truth in the writing. And also we have, when we write, make it plausible. So it should be limited. There should be limit. See, everything has a limit. We shouldn't cross beyond that. We have to maintain that limit in and around the story. When we are talking about a particular person, we have to keep in our mind that there is reality and that it should be limited to the plot. It should not exceed the plot. So, how to give meaning to a short story? How you are going to give a meaning to a short story? So, when we write, we have to keep these things in our mind. So, dangers of digression and dilutions, danger of defections, message of comment, message and comment has to be given importance. So, digression and dissolutions are very unusually intertwined, we can say. And also, what happens here is that we tend to forget that what we were writing is a short story and not a novel. It should not exceed its limit. It should be within the framework of the short story. And also, if it is not, it will, if more sequences are incorporated, the characters and events must be bound in a short story. It should not exceed its limitation. If it exceeds, it becomes delusion. And what are the dangers of defections which we are going to come across is that, see, changing track or midway is always undesirable. See, the story has to move in such a way that it should not be distracted by incorporating certain things which are not necessary there. So if a certain thing is incorporated which is not relevant to the story, there will be a defection in the story. And also, you do not violate the avoidable cynical purpose of your plot. And also, you should keep that to show that all youthful love is a myth. And if you're writing a story on romantic heroine or the campus or about the husband and wife, that relation should not cross its limit. It should be within the framework. So when you may write another story to say that where youthful love is more sin against than sinning, or that, but also decide your commitments and priorities well in advance. So when you write a story, you when you design a plot, before writing a story, you have to design a plot. So when you design a plot, you should keep in your mind that for whom you're writing. Either you're writing for the children's or the teenagers or the lovers or the couples or to the aged. So when we write, you have to think that for whom you're writing. So that is very important. So you should not forget that in the midway in your story, that you're why you're writing, for whom you're writing, and what is the purpose of your writing a story, who is the audience also. See, whatever the message you're trying to say, it should reach the mass. Message and comment should reach the mass. And also, you should remember that all mailing is not limited to a certain emotional response in the mind of the reader to whom you're writing. Because I might have thought something else while I'm writing. I might have kept something in my vision and I might have written. But when it comes to the understanding of the reader, he may visualize something in his understanding. So it varies from person to person. But uh, the reader, the mind of the reader, which you have predetermined, is amusement, wonder, anger, despair, or whatever situation it might be. So surely you can write stories that way if you want to. So, but when you write, modern literature is growing more and more cerebral nowadays, and also awful as a part of the evolutionary process which is taking place in the society. So when you write, your show story will therefore fall short of your legitimate aspirations. And if the end of the story or the climax of the plot is merely chuckle or a sigh and does not provoke the reader to pause for thought, so in that case, you have to uh, railway your platform, or even, sorry, in that way you have to think that where you give completeness to the story. And also, in order to carry the intellectual message, or which should be very effective to the modern reader, see, whatever the story you write, there should be a message in that particular story. So you have to take care of certain things while designing the plot, that you have to keep in your mind. The message should be mm, lamp in the story, it is important in the story, or whether it is implicit in the story. And the uh, voice, the author's voice, which is talking about the character or the moving of the story, should not be muted, or it should appeal to the reader that what you are trying to say is impressionistic, and what they have tried to find is fulfilled by the reader. And also, whatever you have decided to say should be conveyed without complexity of ideas, and it should appeal to the reader, that the story line has accomplished what the writer has tried to say. And also, the next important aspect in narrating a story is the climax. The ending of the story is very important. As the beginning is important, even the ending is as much importance as the beginning. So the ending of the story should not be too logical, and where the reader will not understand, or need not necessarily be too logical or culmination of a purpose of an aspect or an ascent. And also that it should, but the anti-climax is not a negation or climax of an artistic sense, we can say. See, but the climax should not be too logical, where the reader will not understand what's going to happen at the end of the story. What happened to the protagonist? In what way he overcome that particular situation, or how it winded up? So it should not be too logical. And also, it should not be a resolution of the conflict. And also, a climax does not have to be a resolution or a conflict or complication in the plot. And also, it may give rise to certain issues which they have to be squarely faced and resolved by the protagonist. See, it should not be complicated, and it should not harm the feeling of any of the readers. And in that way, if that happens, the author will be responsible to answer the reader. So the ending of the short story should not be too complicated. And also, the element of surprise not essential. So the element of surprise should not be the ending of the story, where it ends that surprise things happen to the protagonist, and it ends up in such a way that the reader does not always have to come upon the reader within a suddenness. It should not be a sudden, unexpected thing should not be revealed at the end of the story. Sudden thing shouldn't happen at the end of the story. And also, there should not be a twist or sting in the climax. And there should be completeness in what you're trying to say. Without the completeness, the plot will never come to an end. So it should not be too complicated to understand by the reader, because we are not making them to complicate to think what's going to happen, how it happened, and all those things. But it should be very clear to the reader how the plot has been designed. So there should be a storyline which conveys a message, and it should run in and around the protagonist, and there should not be too complicated things should be incorporated in the story. So before we design a story, we should keep in our mind that it should be realistic, and it is too not too fantasy things or illusionary things are added up, and things which happens in and around us should be the theme or the storyline of a short story. The first thing is that the plot plays a very important role. That is the plot and the structure, because the is the central, or we can say that it is the heart and soul of a story. Without plot, there is no characters, there is no narration, the tone, nothing will be there. And next, we'll move on to the next unit, that is atmosphere. What is atmosphere? What do we mean by atmosphere? So this is also very important. What are the main objectives of the atmosphere? So what we do in an objectives of atmosphere. See, the term for atmosphere is used to describe the dominant mood as created by the setting, descriptions, and dialogue. See, when we design a plot, even we think about the characters. How many characters we are going to incorporate in the story, what role they are going to play, and what dialogue will be given to that character, and whether the character tried to reach the mass. And also the atmosphere is very important. So atmosphere means the where the plot takes place, or in which circumstances it is incorporated. Atmosphere is a part of fiction, whether long or short. It enables a writer to establish lifelikeness and win the reader's willingness to accept the world created by the short storyteller. See, the atmosphere should be so realistic. See, if you're talking about an urban society or you're talking about a rural society, it should have the uh, that atmosphere should be real, it should be known to the people. So in that way you have to design the story. If you're talking about a rural area and where you have created an atmosphere of urban society, it will not correlate. So if your storyline takes place in the town, it should be related to the society of the town or the city which you have chosen to write. For example, you're talking about an incident which has taken place in London. So there you have to, in the story, it should the even the society should depict the society of London, on the atmosphere of London should be kept in a mind. So it, because it has to be accepted by each and every reader. So the world which you create should by the storyteller should be exactly the same. And also atmosphere is very much important in a fiction, as it is for our planet. It is one of the basic elements in a short story. So atmosphere plays a very important role in the storyline, because it is based on the plot which you have designed. So, atmosphere is a part of fiction, whether it is long or short. See, whether the storyline is short or long, but atmosphere is very important. And also, uh, the atmosphere binds the story together. See, the atmosphere is the one which binds the story together. It brings the story together. The storyline is brought together by the atmosphere. If a one incident is taking place in the town, or it should be the all other incidents which should take place in and around that particular place only. It should not be far off place, should be brought in the storyline. And also it acts like the time frame, past, present, and future. See, this talks about the framework, or the atmosphere talks about the past, the present, as well as the future. And it creates a psychological mood in the reader. See, if I am talking about a forest, the forest appears in my imagination. So I psychologically design myself or think about a forest which I have been there, or so whatever the atmosphere has been created in the story, we imagine according to our understanding. So this binds the psychology of the reader also. So it establishes the locale, we can say, where it binds the thought as well as the storyline together. And atmosphere helps the writer in creating the texture of his imagined world with its characters, locale, and as well as environment. See, atmosphere helps the person. Hello? So, atmosphere helps the writer in creating the texture of his imagined world. See what the writer has visualized according to his imagination, and also his characters, either whether they're local or environmental friendly. So all that matters a lot when you draft a story. And next is that the imaginary world of fiction. So, what is the imaginary world of fiction? See, the fiction is basically centers around the lives of imaginary situations. Some of the elements that contribute are to making this world authentic and lifelike, or descriptions of time periods, of geographical locations, of people, their actions, and their conversation. See, all these things are very important. When I talk about a story, or when I'm writing a story which is taking place in Africa or America or in India, I should keep the culture, the society, and the mindset of the people, and then I should proceed in writing a story. So, if I'm talking about a particular region or a location or a period of time, or about their actions and their conversations, I have to give importance to the time and the place which is necessary. So when I talk about the time, that is setting in time. So in which time you're writing, and also the period, because the novels which were written before the First World War and the Second World War was entirely different from the novels which have been written after the two world wars. So they have kept the generation and the time in their mind, and they have written the stories. And also, we can come across most of the diasporic writings as being written after the post world wars, we can see, because until the two world wars people were thinking about romanticism, and all those things were there in the mind of the people. The effect of 19th century can be seen in the people, but later they realized that after the two world wars they came to know that these many days they were living in illusionary dreamy world, but the world in which we are living is reality. See, because many people lost their life, there was um, the whole world was destroyed, there was unemployment, they faced lot of problem. to overcome the post World War effects. So they started writing the reality, the broad reality in their writing. So when we write, we have to keep the present generation and the present world in a mind and write the story. So time matters a lot, and most fictions nowadays deals with the present, the recent past, or the imaginary future. In all stories we can see that the time setting and are must immediately be recognizable due to the reasons and spaces. So when we start writing, we have to keep in our mind for which time we are, to what we are writing, to whom we are writing, what is the in what we are living in a globalized world where technology is taken its place. So it has become predominant. So setting the local. The other point is local, and also uh, see uh, whether the setting of the story is in the past, the present, or the future, atmosphere plays a very important part. So either if we are writing the story which is related to the pandemic period, or before that, or before the two world wars, so we have to keep the mindset of the people and what kind of society existed and during that particular period. And when we can look ahead, a fictional world always has to be set both in time and place. See, time and place is very important in writing a story. They're knit together. Even the great philosopher Aristotle has talked about this. See, time, place, and actions plays a very important role in composition of a plot. So it should have a beginning, a middle, and an end also. So he says here that the short story is however handicapped because of its length. See, when we write a short story, we may not cover all the points which has been depicted. It may talk about certain incidents which are knit to the protagonist or to the hero. See, all we have to keep in mind is that the writer cannot afford to linger on the past for too long. See, we take up an incident in the life of a person and we never reveal the past of that person. When we write a short story, we imagine that this person belonged to a certain class of people, or what exactly he is, and to which section of the society belongs, what might have happened to him. So in the midway, at the life of a person is taken up. And also we can see that, because in the case of a novelist we can see that he talks about this past as future. Many things have been added up in detail, but that we cannot see in a short story. So we have to notice the place setting is very important. Either it is a desert or a Mediterranean or a ruined civilization. So all these things is very important. The place also plays a very important role. So next comes the function of atmosphere. What is the function of an atmosphere? See, the atmosphere of a story, as we understand, it could, with a little stretching, perform the following functions. So when we write a story, so we have to keep all these things in a mind. See, the atmosphere of a story is very important. And also it should be of little stretching, so it should not be of a more stretching. If we stretch it long, it becomes a novel. So it should not be stretched a lot, and we have to keep these things in mind while uh, the atmosphere is designed in a plot. See, it blinds the story together, it sets the time framework, it creates the mood, it establishes the local, that is the place, it makes for economy and authenticity. So it blinds the story together. The situation which you have narrated or incorporated in the plot. It might be of a number of people who have come there from a different places, who had find themselves in a haunted house, or they have come in search of their career in a particular city. So how their mentality would be and how they try to overcome the situations in order to settle themselves in that particular city. And also it talks about the time. So if you're talking about a situation which has taken place 5 years ago or 10. Hello? Hello? Is it visible? Is it visible? Hello? Hello? Okay, okay, Mohammed. So, what is the main function of atmosphere? So, it blinds the story together and also it sets the time for which time you're writing. For example, if you're talking about a particular incident took place in your country last year, so you have to write about that particular situation, what happened during that time only, but not that you should not keep the incident which is relevant to the present. So the framework has to be written, and also you have to give importance where it sets the time frame, and also the same group could have been trapped in people or something would have happened during that time. So the atmosphere would be panic. Just think about when the world trading center was attacked or collapsed. What happened during that particular period? What was the panic which was among the people, and what happened to them? So there was tents everywhere, and what's going to happen, and how many people died. So in that way, you have to think and give importance to the time. And also, time is very important when you design a story, and also it creates the mood. So you have to bring that reality in the story where it talks about, see, just I'll read out a paragraph which relays about the mood. I quote: and then the sight and scenes they passed on the streets, the concession and racket of the married tariff traffic, the virulent cinema posters, the blazing colors of women's clothing, the profusion of toys and deconstructions of colored paper, and timid the radios and loudspeakers, never tuned to less than top volume, and among us them flower sellers, pilgrims dancing, monkeys, and performing bears. See, when we write about a particular incident, it should be like that as if it is happening in front of us only. So it should generate a mood in the reader. When he reads that, he should imagine that these are all the things as happen. See, if I am moving in a market area or in a marketplace, I should talk about that particular market, how it was, how the people were there, and what all the shops were there, who were buying what, and what was happening in the marketplace. All that atmosphere has to be created. So it generates the mood, we can say. It brings that mood there. And then it established there should be the locale, that is the we should bring that if I'm talking about a fisherman or a sea or a town, I should create local environment there. So it should be too local, it should be near to reality. And also it should be the smell of a fish, or I should talk about those things which are related to that particular story or particular line or the particular thought which I'm trying to explain. If I talking about a fisherman or the life of the fishermans or the locality where the fishermen are living, I should bring that the smell, the life which they lead, and what kind of tense life they are leading, and how do they sell their fishes and all those things. And when they take up a sailing on the sea, what all the hurdles they are going to face, all these things I have to incorporate there. So it makes an economy so authentic, and we can see that some of the writers who have written, they have brought that reality in their writing. For example, the Indian writers who wrote who are writing, they bring the Indianness in their writing. And also we can see that the way of narrating the story is very down to earth teller, we can say, because that induce the time, the atmosphere, everything is related to the place which they are talking. And also the next thing is some story types where atmosphere is important. So there are some kinds of fiction in which atmosphere is and the ghost story. See, if I'm narrating a story about a ghost, I should create such an environment where the ghost resides. Or if I'm talking about a period of a novel, if I'm writing about the 18th century, there I have to give importance to the form where the stories were narrated, or how what are the style, the form, and the theme which was prevalent during that particular period has to be incorporated in that story. So for example, in 18th century novels, we can see that they wrote about the ghost story, and fiction was cited in exotic lands. And also the novel known as the Gothic novel, which depended up for its interest mainly on atmosphere, moss covered castles, and abbeys, pointed Gothic arches, wild torrents, thick forests, desolate heaths, mouldering chapels, and speculatures. And also the atmosphere of the novel is often full of sense of danger, and the threat hangs over everything and everybody. So during 18th century, the interest or the stories which were written encapsulated all these themes in their writing. So they created an atmosphere where it is a old castle where no people resided, and such places were chosen up in writing which is desolate and none of them travels there, old chapel or like that. So they became the major themes or the atmosphere of the stories or the novels which were written during the 18th century. So the period matters a lot. if you're writing, or if you're writing for the present, we keep the present situation in our mind and write. So if we are writing 10 years ago, or and we have taken up such a storyline which has taken place 50 years ago, then I have to keep the society of that time in my mind, and I should write. And next is that the ghost story. If I'm writing a story related to a ghost, it is also there. I have to keep that. I should create that atmosphere where the protagonist or some other characters have fear in that, and also there is a shift in their mood. If any sound is they get distracted, they shiver. So the ghost story, it is another form where much effort has to go into the evocations of the mood, a lonely,
Excuse me,
strong voice, and rattling
excuse
shutters.
me, ma'am.
Hello?
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a question, sir. Seemingly, the materials we have gone through on
Yeah.
our dashboard are not that simplified like the one you are displaying now.
What I'm
So, can we,
displaying?
I mean, the slide you are showing
Ah.
are not that simple, like somehow very simple, like other than the one we are seeing on our dashboard. So can
Okay.
we possibly get the slide after the lecture, after the end of the lecture?
Uh-huh. You want me to display it after the lecture?
Yeah, can we get the slides?
Okay,
The
okay.
slides you are displaying now after the end of the lecture?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Is it visible? Is it
Yes,
visible?
ma, it is. Yes, ma, it is visible. But what I'm trying to say is that can we possibly get the slide after the end of the lecture? As
Yeah,
in, we
yeah,
can get.
you'll get. It will be posted.
Okay, okay, ma.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. See, the storylines are entirely different. So the atmosphere is also very important. This because if I'm talking about an incident which is God fearing, or something which is happening frustrated, where it is tormented, even the atmosphere have to create that. This is what Aristotle says in his poetics about that. When we write a story, or when we think about a plot, we have to pre-design it before it is written. What will be the effect on the audiences or on the reader when we write? So the mood also undergo changes, and also the lonely houses or the rattling shutters or strong winds has to be written. If I'm talking about story which is related, if it is a goat story, there I have to bring out that atmosphere where it is gloomy and the wind is blowing so heavily, and the breezes are the very low, so strong breezes are and there is a fear in the mind of the person. And then also there is that such a kind of an environment has to be created there. And also, if we are talking about the abstract or the dreamlike story, so something which is happening in my dream, in that way, some of the short stories have not branched off into the abstract and the dreamlike. One needs to study the stories of Jorge Luis Borges of modern fiction. See, in certain cases, we like that a person will be imagining certain things in his life which is not going to happen, or he may dream about that, and it is of illusionary things. In that way, if we wanted to know about, or if we wanted to design a story which is related to my dreams, or which I'm going to fulfill in the future, or I may not fulfill those dreams in my life, it will be I'll be getting satisfaction about my things or my desires in my dream also. So certain dream like stories are also been composed. So whenever we write a story, whenever we design a plot, we have to give importance to that. The atmosphere plays a very important role. See, I'm talking about an life of a person in the rural area, but the atmosphere is urban. It never matches with one another. So even the atmosphere is very important whenever I write a story. So atmosphere plays a very important role. So the abstract dreamlike story. So if we want to study about certain stories of George Louis Borges of modern fiction, there we come across the reality, or where he talks about certain things which is beyond. So how atmosphere is created with example. So how we are going to create the atmosphere, and also the atmosphere is very important. So when we write atmosphere, when we talk about an atmosphere, see, we have to give importance to the settings and our economical touches, and also the tale, which is where it is blended, or it is, for example, detailed description has to be given. So for example, a passage of Baltrias Lawrence Durrell, see, it talks about a particular atmosphere: summer, buff sand, hot marble sky; autumn season, sullen, bruise, grace; winter, freezing snow, cold sand; clear sky panels glittering with my washed delta greens, magnificent stracaps. See, detailed description has to be given. If I'm talking about the autumn season, there I have to give a clear cut description of the autumn season, and how it is, what all the things happen, or what all the changes which occurs in that particular season. So, and how the sky will be. So if it is a summer season, this the buff sun, hot marble sky, the hot waves will be breezing. And also you have to talk about that particular season. So if it is a winter season, there you have to give the description of the winter season. So a detailed description has to be given when you're explaining about that particular time or the place. So if it is early morning, you can see how the dawn will be, or if it is in the evening, the dusk, you have to explain the atmosphere of the uh, time, if you're talking about the dawn or dusk or the mid afternoon. So what kind of atmosphere exists during that particular period? So what is the changes in the day? And also we have to keep, oh, when we write, we have to keep the economical touches also. So this is another important point when you
So, ma'am,
pardon.
yeah, yeah, you mean at this particular point, the experience should be relevant with the atmosphere. I
Yeah.
mean, the atmosphere should be relevant with to the experience you encountered,
No, not the
right?
atmosphere. Atmosphere is that when, if for example, I'm explaining, I'm writing a story, or I'm writing a story which is taking place in a summer season, an incident which takes place in a summer season. So I should keep in my mind that I should keep in my mind that the day how it will be, the summer season, how the summer season is, a incident which takes place in a summer season, means even I should explain the day also, the atmosphere of that particular season.
Okay, okay, I got
So
you, ma'am.
yeah, see, I'm talking, and so for example, Geoffrey Chaucer, in his prologue to the Canterbury Tales, he says that the they took up a journey in the month of April, because April is the month that is in England, it is the beginning of winter, a rainy season. So it has completed the summer season and it is the beginning of the rainy season. In that period, they had taken up the journey, because it was where the seeds which has fallen during the summer season has sprouted out from, because of the fast rain. In that way, he has explained the season in the beginning of the poem itself. So in that way, when we talk, if my story line, so if I talk about the time, so it was a summer season, it was raining, and both the people were traveling in a train or in the road. In so what was the atmosphere? What has to be given? Okay,
Excuse me.
yeah,
Yes, I have a question.
yes,
My question is about the plot, regarding the plot.
yeah.
You say our plot should not, the end, you say the end of a plot is very important at the beginning.
End and beginning is very important. Beginning and end
Okay,
plays.
then you say, yes, Ma, you say the end should not be the culmination of the purpose of the
Yeah.
plot. So I want to clarification of this point. It says it should not be the culmination of the purpose, the end of the plot.
Which poet? I'm not
Before,
able.
hello?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, I say you say that the end of our plot should not be the culmination of the purpose of the writer. So I want some clarification on this because I think when you write, the plot must show the purpose of your writing.
Yeah, yeah.
But you say we should not have that in our mind. We should not write in a way that the end of the plot should culminate in the purpose of our writing. Am I clear?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're clear. See, it should not be too complicated. When the ending should not be complicated, because what's going to happen, the writer should not, the reader should not uh, remain as if he has not understood what's going to happen to the protagonist at the end. So it should end in such a way that where he get the answer for his thoughts. The climax should not be too complicated where he couldn't understand how the storyline ends. Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
And
ma. Yes, ma.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it
my
should,
question is that is
I'm
the
not
end of the
able to
story
get you because there is no clarity in your voice, Ramita.
story
ಒಂದು ಇಯರ್ಫೋನ್ ತಂದು ಕೊಡೋಣ ಒಂದು
a conclusion?
ಪ್ರಣತದು. ಹ್ಮ್.
Should the end of the story be a conclusion or the summary of the entire paragraphs of the story?
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that is the end of a short story going to be the conclusion or summary of this entire story?
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yes.
should be the summary, right? Or the conclusion?
Yes. 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 Yes.
Okay.
There should be certain values or morals or a kind of message should be there at the end of the story.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Ah, yeah.
Hello, Ma.
Yeah.
Yes. Is there any practical way of planning the plot? Can you give us a practical way of planning a plot?
Pardon?
When we come to design a plot,
Ah,
can you give us example of how to practically design a plot? How do you plan
see,
the
first
plot?
thing we have to keep in our mind. See, I've decided that I'm going to write a story.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have come across certain incidents in your life, or you might have seen a while you're crossing or while you're in in some of the places, you might have visualized some uh, incidents, or something might have happened in your family and you wanted to write. Then you have to keep, first thing is you have to think about the story, what all the things you're going to incorporate in that story and how it should move, what all the dialogues you're going to assign to the characters, how the thought flows. And also, a short story means it should not be too lengthy like a novel. It should incorporate only 2 to 3 incident, or 3 to 4 incidents should be incorporated, or it might be of 1 or 2 incidents in the life of that particular person, and what happens to that at the end. And also you have to keep where that this story takes place, either in the house, or in a marketplace, or in a school, or in a hospital, or in some other area. See, if you're discussing about an incident which is taking place in an hospital, and there you have to create an environment which is the replica of an hospital. Or if you're writing a story which is taking place in a desert, you have to bring that realistic atmosphere in your story, that where the story is taking place.
Understood, ma.
Before writing a story, we have to decide, see what I'm going to write, or how many characters I'm going to incorporate in that, and how the storyline moves, and what message I am trying to deliver through that particular story. See, these are all the things we have to keep in our mind. And the language what we use is very important. It should not be very difficult language where people will not understand. There should not be too complexity in the language which we are using. It should reach the target language, that is to whom we are writing. It should reach that particular group of people. So when we write or when we draft a story, we have to keep in our mind that the language, as much as possible, the language should be simple, and it should reach the society or the mass to whom we are writing. Okay.
Yes, ma. Another question.
Yeah.
Another question, ma.
Yeah.
What's the difference? What is the difference between plot and the storyline?
What is the plot and the story? Plot is
The
nothing but the
difference.
storyline is nothing but the plot only.
Okay.
Is the structure of the story is related to the storyline.
Okay.
See, the plot is the whole thing, what all the things which you are going to incorporate it in a storyline. It should move in such a way that there should not be distraction in the story. It should flow in such a way it is too naturalistic, and there should not be say sidelines where the story drifts and take up another way, but it should move in such a way that what you have designed it should accomplish.
Understood, ma.
Understood?
Yes, ma.
Yeah. So can I move ahead?
Yes, ma.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Piling of details. So whatever we give, we should give certain details which will reach the details. So atmosphere be created through piling up of details. So when I talk about a particular atmosphere, or see which my story is taking place in a, for example, an Irish writer, W.J. Sinch, has written a one-act play called the Riders to the Sea. In that story, it talks about the life of the Irish fisherman. The atmosphere means he creates there he talks about the sea, the life of the fishermen, and what kind of life is led by them, and what happens to the male of all the fishermen's family, and how the women are going to lead the life. So he has created such an environment or an atmosphere which is related to the life of the fishermen. So when I talk about these things, I should in detail explain the life of the fishermen. So while particular kind of atmosphere can be conjured up just by a touch, the some effect, but the same effect can also be produced by the piling up of a detail. See, in certain cases, we can give a bit of explanations, or in certain cases where if more explanation is needed, we have to incorporate. Okay, so atmosphere also plays a very important role in the story writing. And next, we move on to the character. What is the role of a character? See, in each and every plot, character is very important. Either it is a short story or a novel. So, character plays a very important role. So short story is basically a story of the human conditions as the writer sees it. See, I may look up to a character in a different perspective, and you may look up to a character in a different way. See, I might have kept something in my mind while writing a story, but when you read, you may take up, you may acknowledge him according to your understanding or your imagination. So in a short story is basically a story of the human conditions as the writer sees it, and also the consequence it has to have human characters apart from the events that happen to them. It's important for the storyteller too. See, when I choose a character for my plot or a story, I should imagine myself in his place. See, before writing, what all the hurdles or what all the feelings and emotions a character undergoes. So, whenever you choose a character, choose the character with carefully. So, choose the characters very carefully, because whatever the speech or the dialogues given to that particular character, it should not harm the feelings of any human being. So it should be universal in perception. So develop then a harmonious interaction with the events. So when you develop the character, it should be very harmoniously and smoothly. It should go on according to the events, and also maximize the impression they create at the point of climax, so that you may achieve the best results with your story. So it should not be too high or low. So when you try to give the climax to the story, because the protagonist becomes very important at the end of the story, because he'll be rendering or he'll be passing a message, or there will be morality, or there will be certain kind of a message or values which is imparted through that character. So we should not show him in such a way that he's too high in his ethics or values, but it should move on in so naturalistically the climax should be given. So that will be the best part of the story. It should not be that serious, or it should not be so complexity should not be there at the end, and it should that there should be a message which reaches the reader. So maximize the impression they create at the point of climax. So try to maximize the impression which is created by the character at the end of the story. And also choosing character. See, when we choose a character, we should be very careful, and they should be the part and parcel of the human society. So in a conventional short story, it would be useful to lay down the structure first, as it is the turn of events that provides the result and then summons the characters. See, characters, as I told, when we choose a character, they should be the part and parcel of a society, and also we can see that they impact certain values in them. And so at the end of the story, they provide the results, that the climax or the conclusion of the story, the characters should uh, fall into that structure. And also before setting, when before designing the plot, I should choose the character. ಲೂಸ್ ತರ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡಾಡ್ಬೇಡ. ಹೋಗು. Yeah. So choose the character carefully before setting up the plot. So before designing a plot, see, now I've decided to write a story about a small girl or an incident which has taken place in the life of a girl. So I have to bring two, three incidents together, and then all the characters I'm going to incorporate. And see, there should not be too many characters when you start writing a short story. It should be with few characters where the storyline moves on. The mental equipment and condition of the character is relatively more important than the situation they are required to handle. See, even the mental status of the character is very important because it should suit the situation, and also it should handle the environment in which it is. ನೀವು ಓಡಾಡೋದು ಕಾಣುತ್ತಿಂದೆ. And also the mental equipment or conditions of the character is relatively more important, because the way they think, the way they process everything is very important in a story. And also we have to give, in choosing your characters, you have to bear in mind that there is hardly any place in a short story as distinguished from a novel, where a character is not called upon to make a substantial contribution to the interplay referred to above, but is allowed merely to add to the atmosphere or the scenario. See, while choosing your character, you have to keep in your mind that there hardly any place in a short story, and also it should distinguish from a novel. So because you're writing a short story but you're not writing a novel, because when you write a novel, his role will be entirely different from the short story, because in short story we'll be relying on some of the importance but not a deep level explanation will not be given in a short story. Superficial level we will be describing. So in that way, when we write a short story, we have to keep in our mind that it's only for the short story, but the character is not to be explained as in a novel. And also when we choose only one character, as you can visualize, it's fairly clear dimensions right at the start, or confident of making whole and full body during the course of the story. So when you write a story, you should keep in your mind that the character should be more confident, and also they function to the whole of the story. And what all the parameters to be observed in choosing the characters? See, when we choose a character, what all the parameters we have to keep? So we should adopt in the choosing of characters, certain parameters has to be kept. So however common to all fiction, novels or short stories, and both lead you to formulate answers to the following questions among others. So what all the things we have to keep in our mind before writing a story? So the certain parameters has to be followed. What are these parameters? Do you know your characters? See, when we choose a character, they belong to the different class or group of the society. So either the character, see, if I have chosen a character from 18th century, then I have to roll back myself to think what kind of society existed during that period, and what is the difference between the present generation and the past generation, and what different type of status existed during that particular period of time. See, all these things has to be kept in my mind. So if I have chosen a character from a middle class society, so what kind of atmosphere or the environment is living, and what kind of life is led by him, and what mentality he has, or what is his thinking capacity, and all those things has to be taken up into consideration. So it varies from society to society, from class and creed. So just think about the western and the eastern ideologies, so they are far higher than the other people. So if you're writing for your people, and you have to keep the mentality, the atmosphere, the storyline is moving. So if I'm writing, or if I have chosen a storyline which is taking place in some other country, and then I have to give importance to the society, the period, the time, and also the economic, political, social condition, and the cultural conditions plays a very important role. So character in myths and legends. So if you have chosen a story which talks about a folk tale, or where there is myths, or it is a legend, then the character should be appropriate to that particular storyline. See, if I'm talking about a Greek period, then I should talk about the god, goddesses, or the heroic people who lived and perished during that particular period. So, natural phenomena in a character should be there. So, there should be naturality, reality should be there in the character. There should not be artificiality. So, if some characters speak out, we shouldn't feel that it's too artificial, there is no naturality in their acting or in their speech, but it should be so natural that it is real to the human society. And also whether the reader know the character. So in that way we should see that whether the readers knows about the character, whether the character is familiar to the reader. If I talk about an alien or some person who is living in Mars, Jupiter, because we know what kind of life is led by those people. In that way we are not familiar with those characters, but there should be a natural phenomena in the characters, and also the reader should know about the characters, and they should know who they are, from which to which group they belong, and all those should be familiar. Do you like them? Yes. So this is another question which you have to answer, whether we like the character what we have designed. So without the understanding of the character, so when I think about, when I start writing about a character, I have to keep in my mind that do I like them? Yes. So whatever the character I write, whether it is fictitious, so I should sense that as if I am the one with that character, and in such a way I should give justice to that particular character. And also for characters who are required to perform extreme indecencies or violence, it should not be, so we should depict that in also, in that also. So how we are going to develop the character? There should always be a growth in the character. See, just think at this stage, formulate certain aims and hopes for your story, perhaps to amuse, shock, charm, or educate your fellow beings, or just to make them sit up and think. So you should, when we design a character, it should have certain qualities in them. So we should think that why did he behave like that? What was the reason behind that to say that particular word, or why he spoke those words in that particular situations? Oh, there should be certain aims and hopes in the storyline or the dialogue which has been given to a particular character. See, in some characters we see that they grow and learn. They are, see, they might be not aware about certain things, but in the meanwhile in the story they will, by the end of the story they might have achieved some knowledge about that particular or theme or structure, we can say. The barest outline of a plot and the general appearance and disposition of the characters who will have to interact with the events towards the fulfillment of your aims have been lie down. See, by the end, whether whatever you wanted to convey, it has to be conveyed through that particular character, because he is the mediator between the writer and the reader. So there should be a fulfillment in the achievement, or what the what the writer wanted to convey. So do they have to be characters? So all the characters are no stereotypes. Keep them ordinary and typical, no archetypes. So when we select a character or when we develop a characters, there should not be of stereotypes, should appear to be a stereotype of other such characters in fictions. And also they it would be a mistake to attempt creating another Sherlock Holmes in detective fictions, or like Don Quito in social satire, or Heathcliff in the literature of high romance. So there should be imitations, however good, or to have discontent in literature. So there should be stereotypes. They should be similar to the characters which has been written earlier. So ಹಿಂದೆ ಬರ್ದಿರುವಂತಹ ಹಾಗೇನೆ there should be similarities in there. So you may bring another Sherlock Holmes who take up detective activities like them, or like Shakespeare who have written in the characters like Macbeth or King Lear or Othello. But there should be a stereotypes, there should be the replica, so there should be stereotypes of characters in your story, but you have to keep them ordinary and typical. So when you write or introduce a character, they should be ordinary characters, and they should resemble the society of the times, and they should not be like archetypes. So the license to create characters or characterization, as the term applies to the fiction, or does not permit you as a modern storyteller, or it should not be implicit archetypes, models of virtues or vice, dolls or demons of thoughtless sentiments, and such objects on the intelligent reader. See, when we create a certain characters, they should be filled with emotions, feelings, and all those things. They should not be of archetypes, because we are living in a human society. So there should be the character should be the replica of the human society. So the next important thing is the growth of the characters. Any characters whosoever well conceived would appear to be wooden and static if he just moved along with the demands of the plot and react predictably. So the character should go along with the plot. So it should, they nowhere the reader should feel that the character is not apt to the, but is not acting apt to the particular situation. So he should move along with the plot, and he should react according to the predictability. So his personality must unfold itself in the process of his thoughts and action. So there should be correlation between the action and the thought, and also the action and the thought should correlate always, and so that there will be relevance in between the character and the thought or the situation which he is undergo. So there should be often surprisingly only at the end of the story. So in between the story, we shouldn't bring surprise things or something which is where the reader is uh, trying to find out what's going to happen. So it should be at the end of the diary, there should be a kind of twist at the ending of the story. So we have to take care to see that the pace is not too uneven. See, when we write a story, there should not be unevenness. It should move so smoothly that we never feel that it is where we are reading a story which is artificial, which is far from reality. But it should be very much relevant, and it shows that it is nothing but it is happening in one other person's life, and it should true to reality, and there should not be too artificiality where we feel that it is not happening in the society, something they have written which is not going to happen at all. So always we should keep that pace, that there should not be unevenness in the plot or in the storyline. You should not allow the character to pay all the X's right at the beginning, and you should always ensure that the surprise of a revelation at the end is not such as would seem totally out of character and hence unbelievable. So we should see that the ending should not be a thing where it is designed that it's complicated or it's not going to happen at all, that they have brought in the storyline. So it should end in such a way that either it is tragedy or a happy ending. It should close in such a way where there is reality, where you can see that the same thing is going to happen in the other lives also. The writer speaks through the character. See here, whatever we try to say, it is explained through the characters speak. So the writer never speaks in the storyline. It is through the character he conveys the message what he wanted to convey. And also all character need to be tracked alike, treated alike. See, either a character is minor or major in a story, each and every character has to be treated alike. We should not give importance to some characters and no importance to other characters, but all the characters has to be equally treated in a story. So always it should be in a first person narrative. When we narrate a story, it should be in a first person narration. And the ending, so even the ending plays a very important role. Why ending is important? See, that all characters need to have a memorable exit line. See, when we write a story or when we design a story, we should keep that character will remain in the mind of the reader though he has completed reading the story. So, because the way the climax is given or the way it has been ended up, the minor ones may also well sink away after doing their job. But the final result, namely the impact you would like to create with whatever you have to say on the human condition, depends immeasurably for its success on the famous last lines of the central character. Before he leaves the stage, the climax is vitally important for your story. So, the minor characters may not come to or may not remain till the end of the story, but their act is also as important as the protagonist of the story. So it should move in such a way the last line or the culminating statements which has been depicted by you, which must be very important to the whole story. In such a way, you have to wind up the story through the central character. And also, plays of melodrama. The character plays a very important. So the character should normally leave the stage with a bang, say in a flood of tears or uproars, laughter to underscore the revelation. See, these such things should not be incorporated in the drama. See, abruptly they are going out of the stage. They're banging and saying they're flooded with tears or with uproars, laughters or underscore the revelation. So without revealing anything, they should not wind up the story. But these all things should not be incorporated at the ending of the story. There should be a message which is passed to the reader. And also the revelation should not be too revealing. What is provided to the character and through him to the reader at last should be no more than a flash, an opening out of something tantalizing possibilities thought, though it may massacres or elimination. See, it's a philosophical way of ending has to be narrated at the end of the story. There should be a morality, a kind of message which is delivered to that character should be that it should not be too philosophical, it should not be too clumsy. And next important aspect is the narration, how we are going to narrate the story. See, narration is an important element of several other forms of literature as well. See, narrative technique also plays a very important role in the story. Either it is a poem, either it is a drama, either it is a short story or a novel. Narrative technique is very important, and it is as easy to see, and also it is different from that in the novel or other types of narrating writing. So it varies. The narrative style undergo changes from the short story or a dialogue or a drama or a poem or a novel. See, in the narration in the story is more closely linked with its other elements than it is in other forms of writing. So when you come to the short story narration, it is closely linked with other elements in the writing. And also, one might even see that it is the atmosphere or the character or the plot which determines the narrative mood in the short story. So, narrative technique is very important in the short story because it brings all the elements of the short story together, the atmosphere, the character, and the plot, and that is the storyline. Everything is brought together. So, what are the techniques? What is the heart of the short story? So, the story is one of the most ancient forms of literature. See, we have legends or myths or folklores from our ancestors or how the language or anything which have came into existence, and everything is our culture and our tradition is associated with certain myths or legends or folk story folklores. So in the same way, story is considered as one of the ancient form of literature. And also we come to know that ancients, as it is almost as ancient as the conscious use of human speech also. So there were, in the beginning, the stories were narrated in the oral form, but later only it, after the inventions of the alphabet or the scriptures, it came into written form. But earlier, the oldest form of writing was ancient forms of writing, that is through oral narration. Through oral narration, the stories were narrated, it passed down from one person to another person. In that way, the stories were narrated. So the short story, as I can define, is that as a well defined subgenre in modern literary form. So when we come, the short story writing came into existence in the modern form of writing. So earlier, the and epics have stories in them. So when we take up Iliad, Odyssey, and in all those, there are lot of stories which are connected to the main storyline. So either it is a tragedy or a comedy or a novel. See, there are many stories which are incorporated, which is got linked to the main storyline. But in short story, it breaks off the form, and also all of them and acquires its own distinct form. See, when it comes to a short story, it is not the same as it is in the epic or a novel. Here, only few incidents are incorporated, and it is knit together where there is connectivity between the characters or the incidents. So, characteristics of narration in the short story, we have to follow these things. The short story is being compressed by means of style. The effect of comparison is really in the feeling of or expanding into life, which a short story on its completion includes. There is more life in a short story than it actually presents. So when in a short story we can see the life, because it takes place in a span of time, and it's not too lengthy as a novel, and also it is too very compressed. It is, the show stories are compressive, and also it talks about the life of a particular character. So the difference between narrative methods of the novel and the short story, what is the difference between the narrative method of a short story and a novel? So the narrative method of the short story is an invention, a discovery that answers the challenges and necessity of brevity. But whereas there is a difference between the events and episodes in a novel and those in a short story. When it comes to a short story, it may talk about a particular incident or a challenge or a discovery or some thing you have invented, or it is related to a particular period of time. That's it. But in short story, it is very brief explanation is given. But when it comes to a novel, there many episodes, many incidents, many people are brought together, and it becomes a series of actions which takes place in the life of a protagonist. Okay. And then the definiteness of tile in the short story springs from the fact that there is nothing to follow, nothing to fall back upon, no further space of life to look forward to. And also, the end of the story is the end, it is either achievement or failure. When it comes to the short story, there you're going to put an end to that particular incident, or where you're passing a message to that story which you have narrated, but further it's not going to proceed. The style of the novel as a rhythm of peaks and valleys, it may measure its way through life. So it might be many incidents which has taken place in the life of the protagonist, and even there are certain rhythms and peaks and valleys in the life of a person. But the style of the novel is entirely different from the style of a short story. See, in every short story, there should be a sense of discovery. So there is something, a message, or you are invented something, or some kind of discoveries where a father comes in contact with the daughter, or there should be, if a husband and wife are quarreling, through certain message they wind up their quarrel. Like that, the story has to be uh, ended up. So a kind of discovery where they realize a fault which they have committed without the knowledge. So when the short story writer also finds his piece fully formed in his imagination, all the short stories are formed according to their imagination. So here there are some certain stories which has been written by the past writers, and such stories like the Russians and the French short stories, which has been written by Chekhov and Gaidi where in their stories we can see in whereas when we compare the short stories of Mupsan and Chekhov, there is nowhere any sense of hurry, effort, manipulation, or an excessive energy in pointing to the basic insight of the story. See, when we see the stories which has been the short stories, because the Russians are well known for the short stories, even the French writers are well known for the short stories. There we can see that there is no sense of hurry, not much effort or manipulations or excessive energy has been used in writing the story. It flows in such a way, it in a simple obviousness we can see in their writing, and marks the secondariness in a short story. That is what makes the difference between Mupsen and Chekhov on the one hand and O. Henry on the other. See, O. Henry's writing is entirely different from these two Russian and French writers. So when they write, there is no hurriedness or manipulation or excessive energy which can be seen in their writing. But when you come up to O. Henry's writing, there also he writes a story which is knitted with the person and how he grows in his story. So there is entirely different between the French, the Russians, the German writers. See, the way they write is based upon their tradition, their culture, and also the environment in which they are living. So, in the narrative mode of great short story writers in English, when you take up French and German writers, their methodology, there is no hurriedness, they are simple, and we feel that it is near to the life. But when it comes to the narrative technique of the English writers, in literary tradition, Flint literature is very closely related to the English than Russian. And that is why Mupsen have been a more influential model than Chekhov. See, in the past, the French writers had influenced the English writers. We can see the influence of French writers on all the other writers of the time. So we can see the influence of French in English writing. Even the influence of the Russian short story writers can be seen in the English writers. Some of the writers we can see is that what type of atmosphere or the narrative technique was used in their writing. So, like Edgar Allan Poe's atmosphere was clumsy, and also he gave much importance to atmosphere. Somras Morgan gave important, he went to conscious art, and D.H. Lawrence was gave importance to mystery and complexities of life was dealt in his narration. So autonomy. So when it comes to James Joyce, there we can see the autonomy of style, which has been in where he has given importance to uh, stream of consciousness writing. And also Hemingway, we can see a rigorous and bare style which is used by in his composition. See, each one of them had their own way of writing. It varied from one person to another person. None of them followed the same narrative technique in composition of the stories. Each one of them had their own methodology, own style in writing the stories or poems or the novel. So it varied from person to person, from country to country, and from nation to nation. So when we write, when we start designing a short story, we have to keep all these things in a mind. The first thing is that the plot. The first thing is we have to design the plot. After designing the plot, we have to think about the narrative technique, and then the atmosphere, see, and the narrative technique, and also the characterization. All these four things are very important in writing a short story. Okay, here we end the block one. Do you have any queries or questions?
No, no, there is no question.
No questions?
Yes, no question.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello?
Yes, madam. Madam. They have any questions?
No, no questions.
Yeah. Okay, madam. Thank you, madam. We can wind up the meeting.
Yeah. Thank you. We meet you next week.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you.
Mohammed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, join tomorrow 3 o'clock.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Thank you, madam.